For countless generations, the human species lived inside a world that has since vanished completely. Not destroyed, not buried, simply overtaken, layer by layer, by everything we built on top of it. The savannas still exist. The stars above them are the same, but the people who moved through that landscape, who read it like a language, who carried everything they owned and needed nothing more, those people are gone. And yet they are not strangers. Anatomically, they were identical to us. The same hands, the same vocal architecture, the same brain, folded into the same structure, capable of the same range of thought, memory, and emotion. The person who woke up 200,000 years ago in the shadow of an African escarpment was not a precursor to humanity. That person was humanity, fully realized, fully present. What they inhabited was not a simpler world. It was a world of staggering complexity, one they had to read with perfect accuracy every single day just to remain alive. A world where the angle of a shadow told you where the water was, where the behavior of a single bird could mean the difference between walking into danger and walking away from it. This is one day in that world, not the most dramatic day, not the day anything changed forever, just a day. The kind of day that happened 10,000 times across a single lifetime, and yet contained within it the full architecture of a human existence. Before the light returns. The darkness before dawn on the African savanna is not the soft darkness of a curtained room. It is total. It presses against the eyes. It carries sound the way water carries sound. Everything amplified, directional, immediate. The grunt of a distant predator travels through it cleanly. The shift of weight on dry grass is audible at 20 meters. Inside a shallow rock overhang at the edge of a valley, 12 people are asleep. They lie pressed together, not from affection alone, but from necessity. The night temperature has dropped sharply. A fire burns low at the mouth of the shelter, its coals casting just enough light to define the shapes of bodies and the darkness beyond them. The smoke drifts outward and performs a second function. It carries a human scent through the surrounding grass, an olfactory boundary that most large predators read and respect. One man is already awake. He has been awake for some time. He sits near the fire with the stillness of someone listening, and he is listening, not in the way a person listens for a sound they expect, but in the way a person monitors an entire environment, cataloging, comparing, noting what is present and what is absent. The Hadada ibis has not called. A particular frog that vocalizes from the drainage channel to the east has gone silent. These are not neutral observations. Silence in specific registers of the night landscape carries meaning. He is reading them the way a navigator reads wind. He is, by the measures of his world, old, somewhere in his early 30s. His body records that age in specific ways. A healed fracture along one forearm, a lower back that has stiffened from years of carrying, teeth worn from a lifetime of processing food and fiber. He has survived long enough to hold knowledge that no one else in this group possesses. That knowledge, the location of a secondary water source 2 days to the south, the behavior of a specific herd along a dry riverbed, the signs that precede a particular kind of storm, is not stored anywhere outside his mind. It exists only in him. His survival is, in this precise sense, the group's survival. He feeds the fire, the flames return, and one by one, without announcement, the others begin to surface from sleep. Underscore, 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 the language before language. Here is the first thing that would surprise you. Standing at the edge of that rock shelter in the gray light before sunrise, they are talking. Not in gestures, not in grunts. In a structured, layered spoken language, a system capable of reference, abstraction, memory, and instruction. The archaeological and linguistic evidence now strongly supports the conclusion that fully complex language existed in our species at least 200,000 years ago. The people inside this shelter are not pre-linguistic. They are communicating with a fluency and depth that would be entirely recognizable in any modern context. What you would not recognize is the content. A woman nursing an infant describes, in precise terms, something she observed the previous afternoon along the tree line to the northeast. Two men who were not present when she observed it respond with specific questions. Their responses indicate that they hold a mental map of that terrain, in detail sufficient to evaluate her report. A teenage boy imitates a bird call and is corrected twice by an older woman who repeats the correct call until he reproduces it accurately. She is teaching him something that may save his life. The call distinguishes between two species whose behavior near water sources is fundamentally different. This is not incidental conversation. Every word exchanged in the first minutes of the morning is operationally significant. These people have no institutions, no infrastructure, and no margin. The information held in living minds and transmitted through spoken exchange is their technology. It is their library. When an elder dies, entire bodies of knowledge that took decades to accumulate disappear with them. The loss is equivalent, in functional terms, to the burning of a library. They understand this without theorizing about it, which is why the old man near the fire is never left alone, moving through a world you cannot see. By the time the sky begins to lighten in the east, not dawn yet, but the first dilution of darkness, the group is moving, not hurrying, not wandering, moving with a purposeful economy that reveals prior planning. They travel in a formation so consistent it has the quality of instinct, though it is not instinct. It was learned. The two strongest adults walk the outer edges in front. Children occupy the interior. Those with the sharpest hearing position themselves on the sides most exposed to the tree line. This configuration distributes risk and maximizes early warning. It has been refined across hundreds of thousands of years of hominid movement through open environments into something close to optimal. The grass here is chest high and dry. Its movement in the wind creates a constant low sound, and this sound is information. When the wind moves uniformly through it, the sound is uniform, a steady, distributed rustle. When something large stands still within the grass, the sound stops in that location. The group reads these acoustic maps unconsciously, the way a sailor reads the surface pattern of water. They are not looking for predators. They are listening for the specific silence that predators create. They know this landscape the way you know the inside of your house. Every drainage channel, every rocky prominence, every tree whose canopy shape indicates the presence of underground water. They are not navigating through this terrain. They are reading it. And the text, this morning, is giving them specific information. The herd they tracked 2 days ago has moved northeast, toward the permanent water source. The spoor is not visible to an untrained eye, but the bent grass patterns, the insect behavior around a particular area of disturbed soil, the faint compression lines that cross the hillside at a specific angle, these are a record as legible to this group as a printed map. They have been walking for less than an hour. They have already made 3 navigational decisions based on environmental data that most modern humans would walk past without registering. What the bones remember. The popular image of life before agriculture is constructed almost entirely from assumption and almost entirely wrong. The assumption is scarcity, constant hunger, bodies worn to failure by a world indifferent to survival. The skeletal record corrects this with uncomfortable specificity. Analysis of Upper Paleolithic remains from multiple sites across Africa and Eurasia reveals people in remarkable physical condition. Bone density was high. Repetitive stress injuries, the kind that would become epidemic in early farming populations, were rare. Average stature was, in many populations, not significantly exceeded again until the 20th century. These were not bodies degraded by their environment. They were bodies shaped and strengthened by it. But here is the detail the bones cannot show you, and it is the detail that matters most on a morning like this one. The cognitive load these people carried, a skilled forager operating in a complex environment, maintains a working knowledge of hundreds of plant species, their seasonal cycles, their toxic variants, their preparation requirements, their medicinal properties. They track the behavioral patterns of dozens of animal species across changing seasons. They hold detailed spatial maps of territories spanning hundreds of square kilometers. They monitor social relationships within the group with the kind of precision that anthropologists typically associate with highly complex social organizations. They do all of this simultaneously, without instruments, without records, entirely within the architecture of a mind identical to yours. The question is not whether these people were intelligent. The question is whether we have given ourselves adequate tasks. The economics of the open world. By mid-morning, the group has spread across a rocky hillside where fig trees grow at the base of a granite escarpment. This is not an accident of wandering. This site was the destination. It was planned the previous evening based on knowledge of the seasonal cycle of this particular tree, in this particular location, at this particular point in the dry season. The work of gathering does not look like labor from a distance. It looks, if anything, like a kind of purposeful leisure. People move between trees, testing, selecting, discarding. Children mimic adults. Adults correct children. Tubers are excavated with fire-hardened digging implements. Their selection guided by knowledge of which root structures indicate edible flesh and which indicate toxicity. An older woman moves along a rock face, examining lichen with the attention of someone reading fine print. She extracts a small quantity, wraps it in a folded leaf. Its use is medicinal. The condition it treats is not acute today. She is collecting against a future need. This is the characteristic that most fundamentally distinguishes the economics of this world from the assumptions built around it. These people are not reactive. They plan. They store knowledge. They anticipate conditions days and weeks in advance and move resources, including themselves, in response to future projections. The absence of physical storage does not indicate the absence of strategic thinking. It indicates a different architecture of strategy, one carried entirely in minds and expressed through movement and timing rather than through accumulation. In an immediate return economy where food is consumed shortly after it is found, wealth cannot be stockpiled. And because wealth cannot be stockpiled, it cannot be used as leverage. The social consequence of this is profound. The egalitarianism of these groups is not ideological. It is structural. Power requires accumulation as its instrument. Remove accumulation, and dominance hierarchies lose their mechanism. The group possesses a simple corrective for anyone who attempts to command others or claim disproportionate resources. They walk away. In a world without fences or fixed property, freedom is measured in the distance you are willing to cover. The hour. The predators sleep. The midday heat descends like a physical weight. The light bleaches the color from the landscape. The air above the grassland shimmers. Large predators, lions, leopards, have retreated into shade. This is the window, and the group uses it with the precision of people who have learned to read the clock of a day in an environment that punishes imprecision. The hunters move out from the main group, 3 men and 1 woman, each carrying a wooden spear with a stone-tipped point. The tip represents something worth pausing on. It is not a simple sharpened rock. It is a hafted composite tool, a stone flake, napped to a specific geometry, attached to a split wooden shaft with plant fiber cordage and sealed with resin boiled from tree bark. Producing it required locating the correct stone type, transporting it, napping it to shape without fracturing it incorrectly, preparing the adhesive, and completing the binding while keeping the attachment within a tolerance that would survive the force of a throw. Cognitive scientists estimate that this sequence of operations requires the capacity for multi-stage planning, working memory that bridges across time, and a theory of how materials interact. This tool was not made today. It was made 3 days ago, and it was made well, because the person who made it has been making tools since childhood and has spent a lifetime refining the technique through a process that is neither art nor science in the modern sense, but is simultaneously both. The knowledge encoded in their hands is as complex and hard-won as any professional skill in any age. The hunters read the landscape as they move through it. A broken branch at a specific height indicates the passage of something large. A disturbance in the soil near a termite mound suggests recent digging by a particular animal. They move in silence, not the uncomfortable silence of people suppressing the urge to speak, but the natural silence of people for whom silence is the appropriate mode of engagement with this environment. They communicate in gestures developed across years of shared experience. A flattened hand held low means stop. 2 fingers extended and moved slowly means something large, moving away, unaware. They are not simply hunting. They are participating in an ecosystem they understand at a depth that has no modern parallel. They know the prey's range, its water schedule, its behavioral responses to temperature and wind direction. They have positioned themselves downwind at a location the animal is likely to pass based on time of day and season. This is not luck. It is applied ecology, accumulated over decades and transmitted through generations, refined continuously by outcome. What cannot be carried? Late afternoon. The light softens. The group reassembles at the rock overhang, bringing what the day produced. The gathering has yielded enough. Tubers, figs, insects collected from a termite mound whose fat content rivals any cultivated food source. The hunt produced a mid-sized animal, brought down cleanly. The processing of it begins immediately and efficiently. Every part used, the hide folded and set aside, the bones cracked for marrow. Around the fire that evening, something happens that resists being filed under the category of survival. A man begins to sing. It is a short, repetitive melodic phrase, and within a few repetitions, 2 others join it. The children, who have been restless, become still. This is not performance. It is not ceremony in any formal sense. It is simply what humans do when the day's work is done, and the fire is burning, and the perimeter is secure. They make music. They have been doing this, in one form or another, for as long as there have been human vocal cords and human social groups. The social intelligence operating around that fire is as intricate as anything produced by civilization. The relationships between these 12 people have been managed, repaired, negotiated, and deepened across years of proximity. Grievances have been expressed and resolved. Alliances have formed and shifted. A deep history exists between each pair of people in this group, a history conducted entirely in real time, in person, without mediation or record, and held entirely in memory. The old man sits near the fire and watches the children. One of them is learning something from an older child, a knot technique for binding stone to shaft. The older child corrects the younger one 3 times, with a patience that is itself a form of knowledge. The knowledge that some things can only be learned through repetition, that frustration is part of the process, that the skill, once held, will outlast the lesson. Knowledge is moving in this moment from one mind to another. It will continue moving forward in time, hand to hand, generation to generation for thousands of years. Underscore, 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 the pattern beneath. What this single day reveals is something that tends to get lost in the long view of human history, in the narrative arc that runs from stone tools to satellites. These people were not waiting for civilization. They were not incomplete. They were not living in a condition that required improvement. They had developed, across hundreds of thousands of years, a mode of existence finely calibrated to its environment, sophisticated in its social architecture, demanding in its cognitive requirements, rich in its relational depth. The bones record good health. The social structure enforced equality. The cognitive demands produced minds of extraordinary capability. The world they inhabited was not paradise. The margin between sufficiency and catastrophe was real, and they felt it. But the record suggests that on most days, in most seasons, they met their needs within a few hours and spent the remainder of the day in the activities that define a full human life. Conversation, instruction, play, music, the maintenance of relationships that made everything else possible. The transformation that would eventually arrive, settlement, agriculture, hierarchy, the city, was not an ascent out of darkness. It was a trade. A specific set of gains purchased at a specific set of costs that would take thousands of years to become fully visible. What was traded away began here, in a rock shelter at the edge of a valley, with 12 people around a fire and a child learning to tie a knot. The world we have built since is larger, louder, and more powerful than anything those 12 people could have imagined. But it rests entirely on the foundation they laid: the language, the tools, the knowledge of landscape, the capacity for cooperation under pressure, the willingness to teach, and the patience to learn. Everything that came after was built from what they carried.